So I am Dr. Kelly Dunlap. I am the Director of Mental Health Research and Design at iThrive Games. My background, I'm a Doctor of Clinical Psychology, and I also have a Master's in Game Design. And that's why I'm here. Sean?
Hi, my name is Sean Whalen. I'm a producer at iThrive Games, so I get to work with Kelly every day, remotely. Hi. I used to work at a Ren Fair.
Okay, fine. Ian Barker.
I used to work every day. No. So I have I actually have a BA in theater, and I have a Master's of Science in Game Development and Production Management. And that's pretty much also what I do at iThrive. I feel feels, and then I help make games around them and teach people about them.
I'm Max Robbie. I'm a master's student at the American University Game Lab.
I was cheering.
Oh, background, undergrad in psychology, and really been a passionate game designer and game player for my entire life here. So when I got the chance to hop on, help and develop this, I jumped at the chance.
I'm Jack Birkenstock. I'm a master's in human services. I've been practicing for about 23 years in the human services field. I'm also the executive director and one of the founders of the Bodana Group, which is a nonprofit based in York, PA. And we not only advocate, but also utilize tabletop gaming for education, skill building, and therapy. So that's why I am here, kind of joined on to the iThrive group.
So a little background about what we did. Last year, we were at an event in Pennsylvania for a Fred Rogers event. And one of the things that we do at iThrive is that we work with teens to help create games that they actually want to play, but also helps them thrive. So things around like social and emotional learning, intelligence, empathy, things like that. And one of the teens that was at the event was the son of one of our coworkers. And he had this idea of, what would it be like if we had an RPG where instead of like dexterity and charisma, we had, empathy and kindness and kind of the social and emotional components that we were working on at iThrive. And like, whoa, that's a really amazing idea. We should listen to teens and to do this. And so we started making this this tabletop RPG. And along the way, I was put in charge of it, and I will be the first to admit that when I was put in charge of this project, I had played one hour one-off of D&D, and that was the only tabletop role-playing experience I'd ever had in my life. So I've come a long way, and I'm really glad that I'm in a supportive place where I can be vulnerable and share that with you guys. And so I instantly knew that I would need help. And so as part of the iThrive team, Sean here is quite the dungeon master. Is that the right term?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
We call them facilitators. in our game.
Facilitators. Yes. Referees.
That's part of the talk.
Yeah.
Spoilers.
My bad.
And then I found myself, Max and I went to school together. We've been friends for a long time. And I know that he's very much into all kinds of games, but definitely tabletop RPGs. And I found myself, I kept messaging him like, Max, what the hell is an engine? All right, this is tabletop. So I make digital games. So I'm thinking like Unreal. And that is not what we're doing here. And they're using words I don't understand. And it went to him so much, I told iThrive, we need to pay him because he is literally like doing this for me because I don't know what I'm doing. And they're like, okay, that's fine. And then on the last member of our team, like that's here, is Jack, who we wanted somebody who was actually like using games in a therapeutic setting. So the game that we created, the goal is that it would be fun to play wherever, like for anybody who enjoys a good RPG, especially one that's more about like interpersonal intrigue and that kind of stuff. But the goal, the ultimate goal, is that this would be something we could use in therapeutic situations to help teens, kids, young adults to explore more social and emotional issues that they're struggling with, like cooperation, empathy, communication, collaboration, all those really cool things. And so we brought Jack on because that's literally what he does. And so although I would love to claim that I did this, I definitely was just the wrangler, and these guys are really the geniuses behind it. So, Sean, do you want to start with like where we started? I just kind of gave the origin story, but
I mean, I would like to back up and go, you're kind of an expert in how at least psychology concepts can be gamified, even if it's not tabletop.
oh
Like,
yeah,
You know things.
I do.
You know a lot of things.
I drink
So-
and I
Any
know
stuff.
things.
Right. Sort of. She doesn't. You don't really drink.
Answer the question.
And we're off to a good start.
Yes.
No,
Oh my god. So
This is what she has to work with.
it's challenging. So I'll start with Max. So Max, what do you remember about like the first iteration? And I can pull it up if we think that a visual would be helpful.
Sure.
But this thing has been through a lot of iterations so far, and it's like yearish lifespan.
Well, we started off kind of with, as you described, the basic idea of taking these social emotional learning competencies, these core concepts, and building the system around them as your kind of main attributes. Originally, they started off as kind of a spectrum. So you'd be either, here we go, right here. So emotional resilience. The idea is that you want to be kind of in the middle. Being too much of something would be bad. Being too little of something would be bad. So if you're kind of constantly overly emotionally resilient, you're helping out too much. You're giving too much of yourself versus you're an asshole.
Just got real. All right.
So we started off with that and kind of experimented with that a little bit and determined that it was a little sort of hard to design a system that wanted you to be in the middle. There didn't give enough space for people to kind of play around with. So we then moved to a slightly more traditional system of basically the higher your value in the stat, the better.
And here's this lovely thing that Max put together for us.
Oh yes, PowerPoint.
In PowerPoint?
Design purposes.
Yes.
So just proof that you don't need to have mad graphic skills. Not that you don't, Max.
I know I don't.
To like mock something up. And this was really like the very first character sheet we really got to see.
So we kind of built it around, you see what we call drives at the time, are those, if anyone's familiar with the social emotional learning core competencies of kind of self-knowledge, talking to each other, getting things, as you called it. And then they got shortened down to kind of game terms that we could kind of throw around. And we broke it up into kind of the core of who you are is these emotional, psychological thoughts, driving actions. But then you also have some skills that are more about the physical outer world. And that's kind of where we grew from there. I can keep talking, but I don't know if you have other things you want to go.
I'm trying to find the finalized document.
Okay.
So let someone else talk.
There's a way of merging kind of the inner life, which is what drives the character, the outer life.
It's in here, okay? I know. It's not.
Our chat.
See, we
most
talk.
Our
recently.
chat.
I
Oops.
think ours,
Okay.
You and mine.
You know what? This is real, folks. This is how
No,
you know
that's
it's
the four.
live.
That's the three of us, just you and me.
Isn't that? No, that's the three of us.
Exactly.
Don't ask.
But yes.
Where is it?
Yeah, one of the things when we're talking about therapeutic impact is a lot of conversation that you might typically have in a therapeutic setting utilizing RPG. It's literally about, one of the catchphrases we use in Bodhana that kind of speaks to this is it's talking about bringing characters to life. And in any kind of traditional psychotherapeutic exercise, what you talk about in group, it's not that it's not important because it's relevant information, it's sharing concepts, it's developing rapport. But truthfully, if I've been in treatment for any more than 10 seconds, I kind of know what you want me to tell you, based on me, just my experience of being quote unquote a client. So a lot of time, specifically with this, it's more important about why you do the thing you do, because we all kind of know the right versus the wrong, but we make decisions that sometimes aren't in our best interest. So a lot of these attributes and concepts are kind of ways to explain why we make decisions, because that's an easily transferable idea to take from the table to the real life engagement. So that's kind of one of those ways to kind of underpin why a lot of these are as important as they are.
And yeah, that's absolutely the core of the system. When anyone wants to do something that we're going to be rolling dice for, the first thing we ask them is, okay, what is your mindset? What is your character thinking? Why are they acting the way that they're acting in this case? And they choose one of what we've gotten to, hopefully wise.
Yeah. What's my motivation for the scene?
Yep.
Yeah.
And so what we ended up with are what?
I'm breaking him.
Right.
Little by little.
Theater background into gaming. What's my motivation?
So we have mind as one attribute, which is like self-awareness, planning, which is more problem-solving oriented. We're being recorded. This is supposed to be professional.
I'm sorry. Let me add up.
Charm, which is basically charisma. Heart is empathy, and will is determination. So when we've been playtesting this, because we are in the MAGFest Indie Tabletop Showcase, so if anybody wants to come play and play test and give us your feedback, yes, please. We're in the Riverview place where all the board games are?
Yep, kind of a separate building that they've put
the
all
ballroom,
of the tabletop
That's
stuff.
rowdy people who need to be separated.
We'll be running a game session after
Yes.
this panel tonight, so if anyone wants to join.
And so that way, like, if the most important thing to you is your ability to, like, plan and think ahead and, like, look at all the options, then you would, like, choose plan as your number one why of why you do things. And that would kind of govern how you go about your world. And so, now tell me if I'm wrong, guys, but it's very different from kind of more traditional RPGs because you're not necessarily, like, bashing things in, although you certainly could, but you're finding more creative ways to use these kinds of skills to, like, get out of situations. Oh no, Sean, you were facilitating a session using the Pugmire story, right? Mm-hmm. And someone had, like, a super creative way of dealing with cat zombies.
Oh, that was this last fall.
Mm-hmm.
And so the way I like to explain it, at least the way that you kind of reason and play through the engine, is that it's your internal life. It's the thoughts that kind of go on in your head, or that's the way I think of them, or the voices in your head that you go, well, I want to do this, or maybe I don't, but here's the pros, here's the cons, and it's that entire conversation you have with yourself before you go make a decision. It might last a second, but that's what we're playing out. It's why you, or why a character is going to go do these things. So in the session that Kelly was referencing, there's the group of players were in a sort of catacombs sort of thing. Some cat zombies were reanimated and started chasing people, and they had to figure out, how to get away from these beasts. And in a normal RPG setting, you might say, can we set them on fire? What kind of skills do I have? Are they weak against blunt objects or sharp objects or something along those lines? Instead, they one person had a really strong fear of being in enclosed spaces. So being in the catacombs, they were kind of what you might think of as incapacitated, but they were having a panic attack. So part of the team was actually caring for this person. Someone else was realizing that being zombies, they had loose bandages, and maybe they could just try to hook it on something. So instead of actually fighting their way through a encounter, it was about how do we care for the people around us and also just deal with the problem in a way that's not going to be destructive, really. It's just going to solve the problem.
Somebody else had catnip?
I don't think I had catnip in mind. Did I?
I don't know.
I don't think I did. But it's the great thing is that I love about this is it lends itself to more storytelling than just blunt action. You're actually talking about this is my character. This is what my character would do, which you get in RPGs, you get in D&D.
Well, I mean, when you talk about some of the differences between most of your traditional RPGs have physical, mental, social. Like those are typically your breakdown of how your statistics go, or how your attributes are. So one of those old phrases, like, if all I have is a hammer, everything is a nail. Well, let's think about it in that aspect, where if all I have in my arsenal against this wave and this army is I look on my sheet and the first thing I see is, oh, I have a sword, I'll hit it. By not, and I don't even like using the word depriving, but by providing people with an alternative set of ways to think through a problem, we're re-engaging that creative thinking process about, what is going on and how is the person going to be proceeding through this. It almost, and I guess we'll kind of get into some of those as we talk more through the other aspects, but you're kind of encouraging a person to pursue something they didn't do before, which is at one hand challenging, but on the other hand, when you operate very outside of the box and it works out, it's a lot more exciting and rewarding because you're like, holy crap, that worked. Like that. Wow. Okay. Let me try something else different and unique. And, and that's very good at also then motivating a person to take that same, was there another way I could think about this? Like, is there another way that I could proceed with this situation? Even if it's something the person encounters on a day-to-day basis. And the only way to develop new habits or new patterns is to kind of shake away the stodginess of the old pattern.
I remember one of our earliest playtests. Like we didn't even have a formalized story yet. We were thieving in some kind of dark place, and you were DMing this one, and there was a magical rug that was going to attack, and one of our characters had her strength was heart, so like empathy, and one of her house strengths, so like under my strength, was like relationships with animals because she really loves animals, and so she basically said, "Well, can I just like empathize with the rug and make friends with it?" And rolled, and it worked. And so we made friends with the rug, and he was this really great companion, kind of like the
like Carpet from Aladdin.
Carpet for Aladdin, or the Ottoman from Beauty and the Beast, like the little dog. And it was so funny, and I was having a hard time thinking of any other situation where you would approach a potential threat with kindness or like curiosity or like, hey, let's be friends. And it sounds cheesy saying it out loud, but in the moment when you're playing, it feels like there's kind of this giddiness, this warmth of, oh, look, we did this thing. We figured this out. We outsmarted the evil DM who's trying to make us fail. Not that you would do that. DM.
You said evil DM.
Yes. Well, is that redundant?
A little.
Nothing but respect. I tried it. I tried DMing once and it did not go well. I ended up reading the instructions and like what I should read. Anyway, so that's kind of like the overview of how the engine works. If you want to learn more specifically about the engine itself, or come play again, we're in the Riverview gaming area, and we're going to be playing we've got a 2-hour gig after this event. But what I really want to get to, now that you kind of understand the basics, is that we have a really unique team who worked on this. So I am a game designer and a psychologist. Jack is a mental health professional. Max is a board game genius and game designer. Sean can do anything. Like seriously, he's the most amazing person when it comes to just pulling all these things together, taking his theater background, taking his gaming background, taking his project managing stuff and just pushing it all together. And then some other people that we had on here. Is anybody here familiar with the Pugmire series or Onyx Path? So Pugmire is a really, really cool RPG made by Eddie Webb, where the entire realm is dogs and cats and set in an animal world. And it's really, really great and lovely. And he actually wrote one of our stories, which is really, really cool. We also had a story written by Toya Finley. And we also had a third story written by James Portnow, who you might know from Extra Credits. He's the Extra Credits guy. And so we have all three that we're going to be play testing. And it has been a really interesting, and I want to get your guys' feedback on this too. As I've been like trying to project manage things, it's been a really interesting team of having mental health professionals, game designers, like experienced designers, writers, everybody coming together to make this thing work, because it is so like it feels like it crosses so many domains. And I'm just really curious about your guys' experience of working on a team that everybody has such a different perspective that they bring to the table. Okay.
I was going to say, I mean, one of the interesting things about the diverse nature of everything is I think also kind of related to the project, because I mean, one of the things that, again, having worked in therapy for, gosh, too long, but having worked in the field for a while, whenever someone says the word therapeutic game to me, I automatically cringe and kind of wet myself a little, because it's like, no, please don't trot out another copy of Scruples with the dice. Like, so we'll talk about this situation and everybody knows how to point out what the uncomfortable is. So therapeutic games have traditionally been very dry. The Ungame is probably my least favorite of these. A couple people know. I see some nods, some smiles, and a couple people getting ready to cry. It's okay. We're just mentioning it. We're not going to play it. But one of the things that I think is different from this approach is most people start designing a game like this saying, well, I want to design it therapy. Then we might worry about whether or not it's fun. But I think one of the unique approaches to this, and why the diverse team makes so much sense, is the fact of, let's make a fun game and then add underpinnings to it and concepts to it, and let's hang them on it in a way that drives it towards being therapeutic. But at its heart, it's still a very fun and engaging system that does something people know in a very different way. And that's one of the takeaways that I'm getting about it. Again, I've been role-playing since I was 12. That's like 35 years RPG. So I've seen and played a lot of systems. And just that idea of people, well, where's my Where's my combat stat? Where's my combat stat? And it's like, that's not really what we're after here. And at first people are a little like, you took my thing. But after you kind of get through it a little bit and go, okay, tell me a little bit more about that, or explore that a little bit more. You find this opening up, these eyes of wonder that kind of go, I can do that? I don't have to just cast a spell or yes, and go with it. We'll figure where it goes. And to me, that's one of the unique aspects of the whole thing. I think every portion kind of brings that in.
For me, working on this kind of diverse team, really the perspective was having great resources for the psychological, therapeutic end of things, because when you're doing game design, you can encourage player behavior in a variety of ways. You can drive players to be doing certain things. And so it finds like making a change. And so, as an example, when we changed from having that spectrum of a statistic to it's always being better to have more of it and such, it became kind of like, well, players are going to be encouraged to always figure out a way of using their best Y, like a way of describing what they want to do in terms of what they're best at. Like, well, like that's what we're doing in the game. And then one of the, I forget who, but someone on the therapy end of things went out like, well, that's not a bad thing to teach people to look at what they're good at and what they want to do in terms of what they're good at. It's actually kind of a beneficial thing for the therapy.
Sounds like Jack.
Oh, shucks.
So, being able to kind of say like, hey, we're having this kind of direction we're going in, is that good or is that bad? Because we also had another time when it became a slightly competitive aspect. That like, okay, well, we want to kind of avoid that, so let's pull back from there. That's been a really interesting aspect from this diversity for me.
Yeah, and it's working on and with this material, like I love the idea of kind of hacking my own mind. I grew up with speech pathology issues and behavioral issues and things that I had to learn. And then in theater, I loved it because I could play with characters that were different, which is what got me into RPGs. Because it's the idea that you can make up your own realm, you can be someone else, and it doesn't matter because you're playing a character. And there's so many analogs between theater and games that's like an entire lecture series.
Yeah.
But what was fun with this is engaging with an idea of playing another character and playing their mindset, and then having, I almost want to call you coaches, but having two very involved and knowledgeable people that were like, well, no, this is how you would coach someone to be able to take actions that let you engage in a healthy way characters that have a deficiency somewhere or have a difference somewhere. And that was to me that was one of the most interesting parts. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, so you wouldn't just have normal stats or these normal ways of engaging with play. It's, this is the way that when our brains, when you're playing with someone's brain, which is not the right way to say it, but when you're engaging with the inner self.
As I say, you forgot to add mwahaha to the end of that sentence.
But like that was so cool because it's and we watched people like playtest and demo this game, and you can see them start out in an uncomfortable spot. Not necessarily like they felt awkward or I don't know, it's misused, but not healthy, let's say. But they're like, well, I don't know how this person would be because I don't know what it's like to have a low plan. And then over the course of playing, they're so I'm a person that normally makes a schedule and blocks out my day. But if you're just someone that just goes, yeah, let's do it, that's hard to play. But in the course of 2 hours, seeing someone go and like have this kind of realization at minute like 65, oh yeah, they're just kind of a let's do it sort of person, and they just switch.
Yeah, it's very interesting when you're talking about the whole idea of playing to flaws or playing to challenges. Most people, when they conceive of this, or when I talk to folks who are just kind of discovering therapeutic RPG, the almost immediate question is, well, so like when they do the right thing, you give them like a boon, right? And I go, no, but aren't you rewarding positive behavior? I was like, the fact that the roll went well is rewarding positive behavior, and the goal of therapeutic RPG isn't an instant wish machine. part of therapy, one time someone asked me, we were talking about, some of my work, as I've worked with sexual abuse and trauma and with people on both sides of that coin. And a lot of people have asked the question, well, but aren't you afraid of getting an abreaction? Now, terminology's sake, abreaction is, oh my gosh, I don't feel very good right now, and what we're talking about is making me uncomfortable. And I tried to find a creative way to say, actually, for some therapeutic process, we need that. We need to expose ourselves to our uncomfortable, because until we address it, we're not ever going to hope to change it. So I think the idea of a system like this that is designed for us to explore kind of gleefully, if you will, the idea that, you know what, maybe I'm not always the best at something. And that's kind of not the point, because that's not real life. There are things we're good at. There are things we're at. And then there's things that maybe we're not so good at. And sometimes we have to fall back on those unique challenges or deficits as the only way that we could potentially solve a problem. If I'm not good at conflict, but I'm surrounded by a very chaotic household, I'm going to either get better at that or I'm going to crumble. So in some way, addressing that, and even through this narrative exploration of, you can play this character and I'm going to throw situations at you. I'm not going to force the goal isn't to make everyone break down completely, but we want to at least highlight the fact that, I struggle with that. So then the therapist can, outside of the context of the game, go, hey, remember that moment that happened here during that session? Do you want to talk a little bit more about that? So now not only is it a vehicle of exploration, it's also a vehicle of rapport and connection, which now enhances what we got to talk about in that odd, awkward hour of, so what's new? Cricket, 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 cricket. You know what I mean? So the game specifically with this is literally charged for therapeutic conversation that fits very directly into the way that it was designed, with just the simple introduction of the whys.
I think one of the things that's special about this, at least for me, and I say that as someone who has put a lot into this, so there's probably a little bit of bias. One of the unique things is that it actually brought these two levels of expertise together. You probably would be surprised, or maybe you wouldn't, at how few times when game designers are making games about mental health, how often there is no mental health person involved at all, or person experiencing that mental health issue. Making a game about depression, but not talking to a mental health professional or someone who's experienced depression. It's very, very common. Similarly, in the mental health space, it's incredibly common to make a game that is empirically sound and based on all the research, but it's a crappy game that nobody wants to play because psychologists generally are not game designers. And these two sectors.
What
Thank you.
Hey,
But yeah, it's this idea, and I feel like it feels so stupid to even say it outside, but the fact that we went to clinicians and asked them, what do you want? Like, if you were to use a tabletop RPG, what are you using now, and what do you wish was different? So like that, and then going to game designers like Eddie Webb and bringing in people like Max and making sure that Sean and myself are involved means that you're also making sure that it is a game. It's not gamified. It's not stickers. It's not, power-ups. It is literally at its core a game. And in the few times that I've been able to play test it, it genuinely feels that way. And I don't know.
No, I was just, I don't want to dominate everything.
I do. Did you not hear my voice go
Fade
up?
out slowly at the end there.
Have you guys had that experience? I don't think Jack, you've gotten to play it so much.
Not quite so much.
But have you
I
had that
ran
experience where it felt like a real game?
Oh, I mean, that from the very start, the design perspective was, we're going to make a game that's fun first and can help people second. Because if you don't, it's not fun, people aren't going to play it, and they're not going to help anybody. So,
right. Immersion is a huge level of why this method as a therapeutic approach works in the first place. Because I'm allowing myself to climb into that safe space of my character. So when things happen to, my character, they're not happening to me. So I'm allowed to explore emotionally sensitive material or something that's real deep or painful, but my character is going through it. And it sounds like something that's kind of like we're BSing ourselves, but truthfully, when we know about the brain and how the brain develops and grows and changes, the beauty of this is my brain doesn't give a frog's FA whether it is a simulation, a real world me going through something, or whatever. The brain is still using the same centers, which is still engaging all those chemicals that promote understanding and competence and remembering and locking that into our basis. So simulation is just as good as real world exploration. As a matter of fact, it's better because now if I ask that prince or princess in that game out as a way to practice asking somebody out, yeah, the rejection might still feel similar, but it's different because the real world consequence is meh. But I'm still practicing, so I still maybe feel that nervousness in my brain. So now I know how nervous I might feel when I go to ask somebody out. And it's that game providing the way for us to explore this. It's also one of the brilliant things about this being a universal system, where it is not tied to a specific genre or a specific world. It is open-ended. So you could tell a film noir scenario. You could do modern day. You could do World War II. You could do horror. You could do sci-fi. You could do fantasy. Because creating this system or the setting that is going to be relevant for the person makes it more engaging, even more so to add to the basics of it being a good system. And it's kind of the fact of what I've seen through the playtests I ran is the fact that it causes you to think about things so much more differently than you would. And again, no disparaging at all here when I say like, you know, your D&Ds or your Pathfinders or your more like Shadowrun, Cthulhu, your more traditional conflict-based roll it, hit it, hurt it kind of mechanic. A lot of times people very initially are very reticent, very uncomfortable. It's kind of like you're asking me to tightrope walk without a pole. But eventually, as you get into that idea of discovering why you're going to do something and making them make more sense, you're getting more engagement because literally you're asking yourself why it's a good or a bad idea to do this. So it's a wonderful system that gets people thinking in a different way, but not in a pedantic, boring, like, oh God, here we go, it's group time again. I'm talking about my feelings. No, it's like, so where were we last time? You know, so that engagement through the game helps people be more excited about this process and talking about their feelings, which is incredible. That's like a therapist's dream to have that kind of process.
So this engine has gone through a lot of iterations. We've only shown you a couple. Sean and Max have been at like the forefront of getting this play tested. And I know that's something that's very, very important to me and I think is just good practice in general, is that if you make something, you should give it to people as soon as you can, let them tear it apart so that you can make it better. I do believe that you can probably see this as a CSE character sheet _ version 10 right there. So it's gone through a lot of iterations. And Max and Sean, I would love to hear from you guys about how this, how the playtesting has evolved over time, especially considering you were both there at Gen Con last year when we announced it and we first like released it into the wild. And you've also playtested it at other locations. So I'd love to hear from you guys. Put a question in my voice so that you will know. Question mark?
There you go.
Love to hear from us
And
about,
the tilt.
and about the process of how it's changed in playtesting.
Yeah. How the responses have changed and how you've known that, hey, this needs to change.
Oh, I mean, I want to be correctly nice, but
No, be honest.
It's pretty. Players have been very forthright with saying this doesn't work, which has been perfect. Like I've been working in games for long enough that like that's exactly what I need to hear. Can you be more explicit about why that doesn't work? And like, well, it doesn't make sense if you do this action and then that, or if you're guiding me this way or that way. So people have been wonderfully forward about things that don't necessarily work. So like one of the other sheets, and we really loved using this metaphor of spoons in the game. Spoon theory being I see a lot of heads nodding already. Which is great, and I loved having this. It was a great metaphor to have in the game because it was like, hey, we want to be so considerate of what's going on, and this is, you know, it was great to say like I'm spending a spoon to help amplify this action, even though it will kind of make me function at a somewhat lower level for the rest of the game. And it seemed like a good idea, but it didn't really work mechanically. And we were basically being too direct with the expression.
Yes.
So I mean, it eventually kind of, for a number of reasons, they were like, well, first of all, 3 spoons, which seems like a manageable resource, is just not enough when you're playing a game. Yeah, normally you have more of some kind of resource that you're going to spend, especially when it's a longer term play session than something you're really doing for a while. So I remember just seeing that as going from, this is a great idea, it seems like it's worked, people actually liked the idea, but mechanically in play, nah, we can't.
Yeah, absolutely. The spoons is what I was going to bring up as well, because it started off as this resource you spent. You sort of chose to push yourself and put yourself at a disadvantage for the rest of the day in order to get some advantage in this one roll. Turns out, players are hoarders, and if you give them something, they're not going to spend it if they don't have to. So it ended up being a mechanic that was barely used, and also didn't really fit exactly what we were trying to go for. So then it evolved over some time, and now has turned into the tries system, which is much more of an kind of emotional fuel, the resident. So now any action you take basically takes a certain part of what you can do in the day, and managing how you do that has become important, which has really turned out beautifully because it's now become this almost pseudo-economy part of the game that then relies on balancing each other, because you can help each other out and take some of that emotional load and like spend some of your tries to help someone else do an action. And it's become a lot more about the interconnectivity between the players rather than just what I can do.
Yeah,
that's evolved heavily.
And it's funny how we started, because as we tested the spoon system, we started just kind of modifying a little bit. Like, well, let's say you had an incredibly successful roll, so we're going to give you like a bonus spoon on the next turn that you take, kind of like when you're riding an emotional high. And they're like, oh, that was great and it was fun. And then we went and play tested it somewhere else, and then it started to morph into into that circle that you see. And there's the two sections: the upper uplifting and the lower draining. And so if you're in an uplifted state, it's not going to cost as many tries to do an action. However, if you persevere through a state where you're not, you're drained, you're not as well, that boost is even higher. So when you do succeed, you actually get a little bit of energy back. I think that's kind of where, after trying to modifying the metaphor we worked before, we actually came up with something even smoother and more unique to this engine.
Yeah, in between tries and the previous one, we still we can't use this because we work primarily with teams, and I'm pretty sure our boss did not look kindly on it. But thinking about tries is the amount of fucks you have to give.
Yeah. I was.
So that's kind of one way of thinking about it, is like when you're thinking about the emotional resources that you have, it's the amount of Fs you have to give about something. And if you have no Fs to give, then you are completely out of Fs, and you can see the field in which they are sown, and that it is barren. So,
Yeah.
But like that try system has evolved so much, and it's fascinating to see how it's come through. And I want to leave plenty of time for questions, so maybe just maybe 5 more minutes from us about, I don't know, what has been the most like exciting or okay.
Well, so what I've enjoyed, I've loved working on this engine, but I DM outside of work for friends. That's like my going out night is people coming over to my house, and I DM in my basement like old times. And it's been funny over the last 5 to 8 months, just in DMing in just straight old 5th edition, how much fewer fights have happened, how many encounters, even just me not even really thinking about it necessarily until this last month or so, going, wait, we went through in like an entire 3 hours. You could have had like 8 encounters. You were nice. You avoided. You did any other thing to try to make a situation more about how you relate to the situation rather than can we hammer the situation. Yeah. And that's been interesting because it's actually changed how I look at presenting conflict in just an RPG setting in general. And it's been way more fun. Like, people have been relating to rugs, or they're like, I want to see if I can feel this thing, and they're like, all right, so like, well, you have a low empathy or whatever it was, something along those lines, or like a low wisdom. Mm-hmm. So they critted, so they're like, I'm just gonna feel the thing, and instead, finding other ways to get around, and that's been cool.
Yeah, I actually like a lot, and there was actually a lot of good reflection on the playtest we did at Civic and Sphere with the whole idea of just being able to choose strengths as opposed to merely skills.
Yeah.
Because I know that that's been another thing where, I lockpick. You fail the roll. I lockpick again. I lockpick again. A lot of systems have been moving more towards that, what's my motivation for this scene kind of thing. Like, well, why do you want to lockpick? Do you want to lockpick because you're greedy? Do you want to lockpick because, the antidote for your friend who's dying of a disease is in that safe? Do you want to do it so you can, take care of bury Mr. Potter, and like take all the deeds and give them back to the townsfolk? But your motivation, again, kind of speaks through why you're doing something. And the hows are just a way for us to, there are reasons that we want to do things that we're not good at, or that we maybe don't think are the best idea, because sometimes we're up against it. Maybe we feel that kind of barrage. And again, just the interplay between the how and the why, and just that therapeutic meat there, it's so succulent and so juicy that I'm sorry I'm describing it like lobster, but it really is, like you're saying about people viewing challenge and conflict differently. Just because when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. It's a simple principle going back to Buddhist teachings, but it's universally true.
Can I get that on a pillow?
Oh, yeah.
Cross stitch?
Oh, yeah. Well, I'd have to find someone to do that.
Oh, okay.
For some reason, I keep talking about latch hook. Yeah, it's like a 70s thing. Anybody in here know what I'm talking about? Latch hook? Okay, so all 5 as normal. Okay, my percentage is solid. Very good. It's basically pulling yarn to make like a shag carpet art piece. Is that a good description? Yeah, now people are like, oh, latch hook. It's not those kids that come home when your parents aren't there.
And then you can befriend the rug.
Hey, because rugs have great moral fiber.
Ace.
Good night, everybody.
We're all nice.
So Max,
Yeah.
what about
So,
you?
for me,
Max,
Yeah.
could you tell us another yarn?
nah.
Oh my God, stop.
For me,
Oh,
it's all been
I'm
about.
grabbing at strings.
Can't pull the rug over you.
Oh my
Alright.
God.
So
Hey, let's not tossle about.
Oh.
Won't you just get on with it? Hannah means family.
So for,
Oh God, it
for me
hurts.
at least, I'm really, despite I've come from a lot of background of also different games, but really focused on narrative style and player engagement. And seeing how this system, repeating myself a little bit, or repeating everyone here, lets players engage in new ways and develop and come up with part of the story themselves. Usually when going through it, I'll turn to players like, well, then how did this happen? I'll ask them, and they'll have to come up with stuff, or having them figure out, okay, well, how do they think about this, and what do they do about it then, and then let them invest into the world. That is what's really exciting about me, for me at least, is to see players being a part of the story as deeply as the PMs, or what we call reps. That's what's exciting for me.
I guess I'll share that DMing my very first session after playing twice was a really interesting, terrifying experience. And so if you're a DM, I have such huge respect for you, because it's really, really difficult and challenging, especially if you read the instructions that the players aren't supposed to hear. But getting to be a part of that community, or this community, I'm assuming most people here probably play tabletop RPGs, and that for me has been really fulfilling, to expand my gaming portfolio to really be beyond digital, and that I've gotten to work with these guys to get all sappy has been amazing, because again, finding a game that is both clinically and empirically sound and valid and doesn't suck to play is just, I'm just so delighted. I really do hope that, when we can take this to clinical trials, and that hopefully we'll find it effective, and that way kids can have, and teens can have a better therapeutic experience because they're actually playing a game, not something that's been gamified. So I don't know how I got there from being a DM for the first time and being terrified. Because of course the people I was DMing for were not just my neighbors. It was, I don't know.
I mean, we had, I can't remember who all you had in your group, but at this workshop where she DM'd, I DM'd, and
Eddie Webb.
Oh, and Eddie Webb was DMing for some of Jesus. But like Janelle Jackways was there.
And who is Janelle Jackways?
Janelle Jackways has been working on D&D and like doing mods and panels, and then officially like for like the last since year 2. So that was terrifying.
Yeah, one of the people in my group actually like wrote an academic chapter on D&D.
Yeah.
And like role playing games.
So
yeah, sit down and let
Mike
me tell
Sellers,
you.
Rami Ismail was there. Sorry. The lead designer from WB Games, like the nicest guy on the planet, Osama.
Yeah.
But like so, like some people that like I was fangirling. Oh God, we're gonna play games now. And yeah.
And then there was me going, line?
I did the same thing. I skipped a part. I actually skipped a part of the manual because I was so nervous.
Oh my gosh. So I guess that's us, and hopefully this is intriguing and has been useful and is interesting. But I would love to field questions from you guys, especially if anybody here is wanting to make an RPG and interested in the process. If you're trying to make something different, you have questions about this or about us and what we do. Please feel free to ask, and hopefully you guys will follow us in like the best way possible across the street across the walkway to the Riverview, and we can play. That'd be cool because I have a character set up for our survival one. Her name is Red McKinsey, and she's a mechanic. Yeah, she's very grumpy. Yeah.
It's designed to be a completely universal system. Really, it just depends on the whys are locked in place. They are kind of these social emotional learning competencies about how people think. But as long as you're having your players be beings that think like people, then you can play in the system, because everything else is entirely genre independent. So you can plug anything into it.
So one of the very first things we did is that we went to a group of teenagers in like an alternative school and asked them like, what do you want in a game like this, and what do you not want? What they wanted was mystery, post-apocalyptic, vampires, what else was on there? Like zombies, outer space, like steampunk, sci-fi, pirates. What they didn't want was high school. You know?
So they wanted everything.
Yeah, so
Every anime I watch is awesome.
Yeah.
pretty much. But like that was at the core of it, is like we wanted something that could address things that teens are interested in, and all players in general too.
Yeah.
But not high school. That was like, you were like, no.
You still can do high school if you want to.
Yeah. Well, the benefit of the generic, I mean, it's as long as I'm to some degree getting to escape. And again, I'm one of those guys up here old enough to actually have lived through the great RPG purge of 1983, when massive bonfires of D&D players' handbooks, flames erupted into the night. It was glorious. But one of the things that we used to talk about at that time about escaping a bad thing, but I call escape vacation or a weekend off, So the idea of no matter where you can be to escape, that's kind of, the why generic and universal. It can apply to anyone, anywhere, because not every kid, like one of our rules is we don't just use D&D in our practice, because some kids don't like Tolkien, they don't like fantasy. So we have to kind of keep it open. This is the ultimate open, that one book to rule them all. Ironically,
Yeah, right there.
It's open, right? Who sent you? No.
Is that something I can show and put on the board?
I
don't know if
no.
this
This actually kind of shows you everything you need right here. It's a very rules light system. So basically, the DM, the ref, doesn't actually roll anything ever. It's a system that's just reactive. So the players, run quickly through the system. Basically, your Ys determine the number of dice you roll, and so we wanted to use D6s because we wanted this to be accessible to as many people as possible, and that's a fairly widely usable die. So you determine which Y you're going to use, and then if we can go down, your hows, you decide basically, does one of your hows connect to this? So do you have a strength in doing this? Do you have a weakness in doing this? And if not, you have that middle spot. So that determines the target number you're looking for on the die. They roll that, and then depending on how many successes they get, they can either completely fail, have a really bad thing happen, they can succeed but still have something bad happen, they can have a clean success, they get away with it, or they can have an extra bonus. So the ref is all just kind of interacting with that mechanics, and also interacting like I love the quote from the Maltese Falcon guy, if you get bored, have a man with a gun come in the room. So the ref's job is to just kind of react to the situation and narratively build them forward. They don't have any actual mechanics themselves. Yeah, Raymond Chandler, that's it, yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Oh, you can do either.
Yeah. Depends on the needs of the player as for therapeutic benefit. Sometimes you want to play towards an idealized version of yourself. Sometimes you want to play as that mean bully you have, so you can maybe understand the bully, or, why is my stepdad a jerk? I'm going to play like my stepdad. I'm going to be my stepdad. So sometimes it's even like doing it as a way to vent. There are multiple uses and reasons why we play the characters that we play. That alone could constitute like 4 different panels about why we play who or what we play. But yeah.
And I mean, playing for fun, I put my heart at 1 because that's like the most opposite of who I am. And it's just for funsies for me to play like this gruff, unfeeling, like plan monster, as opposed to like, hey, how's it going? Can we be friends? Because that's me. As opposed to, don't talk to me.
Yes.
Red McKinsey needs her mechanic stuff. Yeah, the green hair. Oh man, we all have such different journeys here.
Wow,
I'm
yeah.
going to say the common thread, and you can tell me I'm wrong, but my feeling on what our common thread is that it's games. It's not just that, and it's 7-ish years ago, it's like games were art, and there's a big argument whether or not games were art. Well, games are play. It's how we experience. It's how we learn and develop. And games also have so much art and storytelling and music and everything else involved. Games are an expression of ourselves and ourselves as a society. So they're a very broad expression. And when you look at that as an expression of who we are and playing who we are, then it opens itself up to therapy or art or something more than just a silly old pastime.
Well, I think it's even if you look at the context of games, specifically role-playing games since their genesis. I mean, the role-playing game hobby was born out of wargaming. It literally was a way to go, yeah, we're rolling dice for all these armies on a field. What if some of those army people, like, what if they had families? Like that's literally where this all started with RPG. So they started assigning, well, that guy's a general, so he's maybe a little different than a foot soldier. So now we had classes, and that started coming in. Well, magic would be fun and cool, but over the years, we actually have seen a shift in game design to being less GM versus player, more collaborative storytelling. And at this point, I mean, if you look at a game like Kids on Bikes as just another kind of narratively driven system, that one is virtually the GM just sacks and go, yeah, that sounds cool. like literally, it is it's seemingly hands-off, but it's very player-driven. So in a system like this also, you're not only giving the player agency to create the scenarios or the kind of thing, like it's literally, here's a scenario. How do you respond to it? How does the roll go? Well, I as the DM to go, haha, because of thy roll. Now it's like, man, that roll looks kind of bad. What do you think happened? So now you're asking a person therapeutically to reflect on failure, or to reflect on the nature of something not going the way that we would like it to. So now we're engaging every active part of experiential process. And it's that narrative power. So I guess to go back to your original question,
Yeah.
how are we doing? I think a big part that I've kind of knew is that, or learned, is that if there's an aspect of this process you don't know about, don't be haughty and self-aggrandized. Like ask for help from people who know better than you do in that part of the process. Like I have zero game design experience whatsoever. I'm a hell of a therapist, but
And so humble.
yeah, but game design, I know very little about it. I've learned a lot, but I'm leagues apart from where these folks are in terms of that.
So I guess the short answer, friendshipping. That's my magic.
Yeah.
Is literally like Max is here because I know him from college and he's a fantastic person. I know Jack because I know of the group that he runs and he puts himself out there and we just happen to run into the same circles.
Yeah.
The funny story of why I work with Sean, I was at an event at GDC because they had free egg rolls. Because that's not my thing, but there were free egg rolls. And so I went, and then the woman who worked for iThrive, that's where I met her. And 2 years later, she messaged a former professor of mine to get my resume. And now I work for this company, which is, I think, really cool. But it's all about friendshipping. So in my experience. And so if you want to friendship, this is a really great place to do it. I would imagine most of the people in this room have similar interests to you. We certainly do. So please feel free to come up, get our contact info. I know for me, Twitter is like the best place ever. I have a cabal of psychology geek. It's a cabal of psychology geeky therapist-y types that we're spread all over the world. Twitter is like the one place that we go to because that's where we can connect. Or there's a Facebook group called the Geek Therapy Network, which is literally a collection of therapists, whether it's physical therapists or speech therapists or psychology therapists who love geeky things, whether it's superheroes or video games or RPGs. And so there's just these spots where like small little like Dagobahs with Yodas where we exist in the universe. And if you can make connections there, like that literally, I mean, that's a large part of what I'm even doing here. It's just by making friends and being nice and saying hi and being the nice person.
Don't network, make friends.
Yes. Networking sucks.
Yeah.
Sure. Was there another question? I thought I saw one. Don't be shy. Yeah. Oh my God. You have no idea what they made me do.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Max.
Dungeon World is actually a fairly strong influence. You probably can see the failure versus failure, the mishap, and all that sort of concept coming from these sort of things. Absolutely. That is my number one suggestion for anyone who wants to do any sort of game design is steal from the best. These ideas are out there. Find them. Find what you do with them, and make them your own. Make these sort of ideas. Meld things together. Fate, Dungeon World, Monster, the whole Apocalypse engine systems, White Wolf, all sorts of things. It goes into making any sort of game system. So find what you enjoy, know what you want to do, and then see, like, have a concept of what you want to do with it, and then see what can fit with that, what you can mold to make into that, and you can really do some great stuff.
They made me read the Fate engine from start to finish. I had played D&D once, and I had to read the Fate engine, and I decided no. I read it, and I went to Max, and I said, I do not understand. I understand the words by themselves, but the way in which syntactically they are put together does not make any sense. Yes, I did. It was, I can't do this. Let me find somebody else, which goes back to friendshipping. Full circle. Oh, wait. Questions? I saw purple, and then there, and then we might... Well, they're not bugging us, so we'll keep going.
Yeah, we've had no light.
Until it kicks out.
Yeah. Yeah, and the purple? Yeah. So the idea is that using RPGs is actually pretty common in mental health social skills groups, because that's kind of inherently what they are. So that is definitely a target population. but we are hoping that it will be adaptable. So one, that clinicians on the fly can adjust it to meet the needs that they have and of their clients, but also with the stories that we are commissioning, having them for not necessarily different disorders, but different like genres or flavors of mental health issue. So like one of them is a survival game, like it's called Dust, and it literally is, can you survive the day? And, you know, for somebody with severe depression or like post-traumatic stress disorder, that theme is going to be really, really relevant. Whereas our Pugmire story is much more kind of like happy-go-lucky adventure, like Indiana Jones tomb raiding with dogs and cats, which might be more appropriate for someone who needs to practice social skills and more extroversion-oriented type of things to maybe become less shy or less anxious about trying new things. So there's not one disorder in particular that we're targeting, mostly under the skills, under the umbrella of social skills, though.
Yeah, I mean, I would only offer that maybe like one of the things as depends on how you teach the system is it is to some degree a very abstract system. So I probably would say that it's not best suited, at least at this stage, for maybe somebody with like an intellectual disability or disorder, because these are pretty lofty ways to get to think. But I mean, if you are less prone to just concrete thinking, it definitely is up there. But I mean, one of the benefits of RPG Therapeutic is we all define who we are by the stories we tell. So if you have a system or a process that enables you to write or tell any story, you literally could be telling anyone's story. And then just like we do, you know, I tell a story to this crowd and you laugh at a certain joke the other one didn't. Now I'm going to start to tell that joke more. I used a different word this time, so I changed my narrative a little bit. So systems like this, you literally, provided the person is on board with it, you can tell or write any story that can help a person change their vision of their story, which in essence changes them.
Yes. So they're based on the Castle 5. So Castle is it stands for something, right? No, that's his last name. Yes. Castle is his last name. And he identified 3 social emotional learning skills. One is, self-awareness. So like the awareness of your own abilities, your own strengths. Self-management, like how well can you regulate once you are aware of something, how can you regulate what's going on within you? One is social. So like you're interacting with others. There are 2 more that are very important, and they have names.
Problem solving.
Problem solving, yes, yes, and responsible decision making. Yes. So those are the 5 areas that Castle like outlined and is empirically based and supported and validated and all that good stuff of important skills for social and emotional development in children and adolescents. So we abstracted them because we figured, self-management might not be super enticing. Responsible decision-making might not be super enticing. So let's change those up. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Yeah. Will is like determination, like the amount of energy that you give into something. Like, do you give up easily or do you like persist and push through? Where self-awareness is, how well aware are you of your own strengths? Like, are you someone who has high self-awareness will know, I really probably shouldn't try to climb that barbed wire fence because I'll probably get hurt. Someone with low self-awareness, I can do it. You know, hold my beer, let me go try it out. And so those are just different, like the one that's under like charm, kind of charisma, is more of like how the social interaction, like how aware are you of social norms and how good are you at that kind of interactive piece. Yeah. All right, cool. Well, thank you guys so much for coming. And one more. Yeah. Right now, at least I'm pretty sure we've done preset stories because this is baby. And when we're building an engine, we need to know, like, if it breaks, we need to know why it broke. And so having a set story is really helpful for knowing, like, okay, we fixed this thing. Does it work now? But I would love to see, especially in a therapeutic setting, clients write their own stories that then they get other group members to play. I can definitely see therapeutic value in that. And then the stories themselves are written in such a way that I could hand you the story Dust and it would have like the instructions on how to write it. So if you wanted to write your own version, you absolutely could. So that is something that we have not done yet, but once we shake down the system enough, and we hope you will all help us with by coming to the Riverview and helping us play. Once we have that solid and we know that the mechanics are good and we know that the system works, then we can branch out and do more different kinds of stories and be more experimental there.
And are there other times, say that right after the panel is not convenient, are there other times during MAGFest that they may be able to sample the critical?
No, because scarcity drives behavior.
Yes.
Yes. No, we
you gotta come.
We are here obviously Saturday or Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 10 to
it's 12 to 4 Friday and Saturday, and then 10 to 2
on Sunday.
On Sunday, with some wiggle room around that. If you show up and like, hey, can we push a little farther? Yeah.
Yes. Does anybody need to know where it is? Oh, sure. It is the Riverview Ballroom. So if you like go out of the conference and there's like a little covered walkway and then it's like right on the water.
If you're looking at any of the maps in the area, it's the kind of all the building that has all the tabletop things in it. And
yeah.
It's the MITS.
Yes.
Is the specific thing on the map.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Yep.
Where all the human cattle chutes are.
All right. I think for reals this time. All right. Thank you guys so much for coming.
Yes, thank you.